Good morning. This is the Keeping It Real Sunday School class from Cornerstone Baptist Church in Richland, Missouri. I'm Dr. Max Thornsberry, and I'm the teacher, and my wife Brenda will be reading the scriptures this morning out of the Authorized Version, the original King James Version of the Bible. We're continuing our study in the area and the concept of mentoring, and we're going to be looking at the book of Esther today. I have got to set up some history for you here because we need to know who Haman is in this story. And I've asked Brenda to go to 1 Samuel chapter 15, and I'm going to have her read several verses there to set this story up. Very important incident occurred just 3 days after the Israelites had crossed the Red Sea into the wilderness. And the Amalekites, which were a tribe of people in that region, attacked the rear of the column, killing both children and older people who were kind of straggling along in the back of this 1.2 million people that are going off across this desert. And God had set up for them a mechanism to destroy the Amalekites. And you can go back and look in 1st and 2nd Chronicles, you can go back and look in Exodus, and you can see that God was very distraught with them. Well, who are the Amalekites? The Amalekites are descendants of Esau. And they fought with the Amalekites, but they did not destroy them. And now we're way up in history, about 500 years later. And the opportunity comes to destroy the Amalekites, and God has given direction to King Saul to do so. We're in 1 Samuel chapter 15. Read verse 1 through 5, please.
Samuel also said unto Saul, The Lord sent me to anoint thee as king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore hearken thou to the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. And Saul gathered the people together and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 footmen and 10,000 men of Judah. And Saul came to a city of Amalek and laid in wait in the valley.
Now Saul was a Benjamite, meaning he was from the tribe of Benjamin. There had been some awful things happen with the tribe of Benjamin, Brenda. If you go back into the book of Joshua and just look at the last couple of chapters there, the Benjamites had not done God's will, and there was a civil war between the Benjamites and the rest of Israel, and the tribe of Benjamin was almost wiped out. God stayed the hand of the Israelites, and the tribe of Benjamin was maintained. The way they were maintained is they came into the camp of the Israelites and waited till the young maidens were out in the vineyards worshiping the Lord and dancing and singing and playing timbrels, and they ran out there and captured them a girl and took them back to be their wife. Kind of a weird story, but that's how the tribe of Benjamin was maintained. Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. We're going to find out that Mordecai in the story is the tribe of Benjamin. You remember the apostle Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. Now, God is setting up a circumstance after he's anointed Saul king in order to wipe the Amalekites out. I want you to notice what he says. Kill every human being, every baby, every woman. I want them wiped out. There is a reasoning behind God's actions, as we're going to see here many years into the future here. Again, I think right at 700, 800 years later, we're going to be dealing with the Amalekites again, trying to destroy the Jews. It seems awfully harsh that God's punishment would be that way, but do you realize that when Jesus comes back, he is going to literally destroy the armies of Satan and all that are associated with them, with the two-edged sword that proceedeth out of his mouth. This is judgment on a nation that's come against Israel. which is going to be the foundation of the genetic structure for the Messiah. So let's read on a little bit there in chapter 15 so we get a little bit. I want you to read verse 8.
And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive and utterly... whatever.
Okay.
He took Agag, the king of them, alive and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword.
14. Now notice God has told him, Brenda,
To destroy everything.
Wipe out everything, specifically Agag, the king. You're going to see why here in a minute. And he did not. He kept Agag. Now Agag's going to finally get it. Samuel's going to kill him and chop him up into pieces and scatter his body all over the area. But Agag is going by tradition, while he's been maintained in the camp there, have relationships with one of his handmaidens, which is going to keep the propagation of the Amalekites going against God's will. And verse...
You said 14?
14, please.
And Samuel said, What meaneth then this bleating of the sheep in mine ears, and the lowing of the oxen which I hear?
Now he also had instructed them to eliminate every animal, all the livestock. And Saul said, well, why should I do that? They got really good cattle, and they got some really good donkeys and some good sheep. And what Samuel say? What's this I hear bleating in the background? What's this cows lowing in the background? What's this donkeys braying in the background? And you're going to see this is the downfall of Saul by not obeying God. Verse 23.
For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king.
Now God removed his anointing from Saul and instructed Samuel to anoint David king, and that's a whole nother lesson. This is set up for us here because we're going to be dealing with a Agagite, a descendant of Agag. And turn to Esther chapter 3 and read verse 1, please.
After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, and the Agagite, good heavens, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him.
Now this Agagite, is a descendant of Agag who Saul did not eliminate quick enough. He had relations with his handmaiden while he was in the camp until Samuel came and destroyed him. And the lineage was maintained. Here we are seeing it some hundreds of years later. That's going to be a major issue. This Haman, who the Bible calls an Arabian, means he come from the wilderness of Arabia, where the Amalekites were from, that is going to be a thorn in the side of the Jewish nation again. And we'll see a little bit more of that here in just a little bit. Haman has been elevated to second in command of all of Persia. All of this is taking place in this book of Esther in Shushan, which is the winter palace of the king of Persia. This name really is Artaxerxes of the first, I believe, and it's Artaxerxes, I think, the third that comes against Alexander, against the Greeks, and Alexander completely wipes them out in Babylon, where Alexander the Great died. But the Persians and the Greeks were long-term enemies, and this is all written about in the book of Daniel. And when Alexander the Great came down the Holy Land, the scholars met him and showed him in the book of Daniel where Daniel predicted, and he spared the Jews. He had a very good relationship with the Jews before he went over and wiped out the Persians. So they are in the palace at Shushan, and the king has asked Vashti, his wife, to come out and dance before the men of the palace as entertainment, probably belly dancing, which was common in that area. Everybody thinks he wanted her dance naked. It does not say that. He just wanted to show her off. And she refused to do it. And so the scholars and the scribes and the Chaldeans that were part of the advisory team said, you can't have this. This woman did not obey you. We'll have women all over the kingdom not obeying their husbands.
Oh, my.
Oh, that's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
You need a new wife. And so he put Vashti aside, did not punish her, did not hurt her, but just put her aside, and started the search for a queen. The king started the search for the queen.
Mm-hmm.
And they went all through the nation, and they wanted virgins, they wanted young maidens, and they selected them for their beauty. And Esther is one of them that was picked to be further prepared. Mm-hmm. They went through 12 months, it says in Esther, of preparation. 6 months they were anointed in the oil of myrrh. And then 6 months they were anointed in another oil. I think it was the oil of a myrtle tree. And preparation for their skin, So what we're looking at today is how Esther has been mentored by not only her uncle Mordecai, but also a team of eunuchs that are taking care of the palace. Now, I must explain a little bit about what eunuchs are. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were made into eunuchs when they were captured. They have no descendants. Unfortunately, I have to say the words, but it's when they take a young boy before he has reached puberty and remove his testicles, surgically remove them. We see that happening today, don't we? Mm-hmm. Unfortunately.
Different
when that happens, you have no male hormone to cause the closure of the epiphyseal lines, which usually occurs when the boy is between 13 and 15. He'll continue to grow some all the way up to 18 or 19 or 20, but essentially his epiphyseal lines, which are the points where the long bones come together, no longer grow when the hormone level, testosterone. Well, in a eunuch, since they don't have any testosterone, they never stop growing. Mm-hmm. A eunuch can be 8 foot tall, 7 foot tall. They were huge. You always see Daniel in any kind of illustration as a tall person, and that's the reason why. The same thing happens with steers. The oxen that pulled the wagons across the plains to Oregon and California, if you keep a steer around long enough, they will literally get this tall over their back. I mean, they are huge. Mm-hmm. And so they used these eunuchs to protect their harem, protect the women, because they weren't sexually attracted to them. But these eunuchs had a lot of power and a lot of position, and we're going to see how one of them took Esther under his wing and prepared her and loved her and took care of her and presented her to the king. And she won. She won the contest, in other words.
First beauty pageant, is that what that was?
I don't know if it was the first one or not, but it was a major one. They had selected women from all over. It said, this is a huge country. It stretches from India all the way down to Ethiopia. Includes all of Egypt, all of the Middle East. I mean, it's a huge empire. And so they selected women from all these tribes, and Esther happened to be Jewish. And she was an orphan girl who her uncle Mordecai, who was a Benjamite, took in and raised her like a daughter. And so Mordecai is a father figure, a mentor to her. So let's go to Esther 2 and read 5 through 7.
Esther 2.
Second chapter of 2, or second chapter of Esther.
5 through 7.
Yes.
Now in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter.
Now, we might recognize this name in this lineage, this Kish. That was the father of Saul. This is many hundred years later. That's not the same person. They just got the same name. But notice they are identified as from the tribe of Benjamin. They are part of those who had been brought captive. Mordecai was taken captive when Jeconiah, the last king of Judah, was captured. And this is the third time that Nebuchadnezzar went to Jerusalem. And he has removed the best that society has and taken them to Babylon. Now the Persians have taken over Babylon. They have whipped the Babylonians and set up their own empire, the Medo-Persian Empire. There are lots of Jews over there, probably a couple of 300,000 of them. I don't know, somebody can go back and count that up. But actually, there are less than 50,000 went back when they built the temple with Ezra and Nehemiah. So most of them stayed there. They're an integral part of this society now. They're involved in all aspects of it. You remember Daniel was the prime minister until he retired. About the time the Medes came in and conquered, the Medo-Persian Empire came in and conquered Babylon. That's the handwriting on the wall. You're weighed in the scale and found wanting. Well, this is after that, and Daniel has probably passed away, and this is the third. Daniel went in the first group, and this is the third group that's been captured, and with them came Mordecai, and Esther has become an orphan, and Mordecai, her uncle, has taken her as his own daughter. Now, that means that he may, in fact, have adopted her, but this woman evidently was just stunningly beautiful. Stunningly beautiful. An Elizabeth Taylor type, just right out there in the open. And of course, she's picked as one of these girls to be prepared to be the queen. And she wins the contest. She becomes the queen. Her Jewish name is Hadassah, however you pronounce that, Hadassah. But her Persian name is Esther. And so we know her as Esther. And then if you turn to Esther chapter 4 and read verses 8 through 14, lots of things have happened here. Haman has been set up. I want to give you a little background on this Haman. Of course, he's an Agagite. Didn't get them all destroyed. Now they're dealing with him again hundreds of years later. He had the king decree that every time he walked by, everybody had to give him obeisance. They had to bow down or honor him in some way. Well, he went by Mordecai, and Mordecai would just sit there like that. Oh, it made him mad.
Oh, I bet it did.
Made him mad.
Oh, yeah.
So he tricked the king into issuing a proclamation that since this Mordecai wasn't honoring the king's decree to give him obeisance, obeisance, close enough for an Ozark hillbilly. He tricked the king into writing a decree that on such and such a date they were going to destroy the whole Jewish nation. That in itself seems really unusual to me, because here you have a king in charge of a huge empire stretching from India all the way to Ethiopia and everything in between, all the way north to the Mediterranean, all the way north. I mean, they crossed over to get into Greece to conquer the Greeks there. That's the marathon, They're up there, and the guy runs all the way back in 24 miles or whatever a marathon is and drops dead, but gives the message. Huge battle, naval battle, land battle. They never could conquer them. And finally, Alexander the Great got the job done for Greece. All of this is taking place while this Haman is trying to set up a situation to kill the Jews. And so then we go to Esther 4, 8 through 14. When Mordecai learned what had happened, I also understand that Mordecai had saved the king's life. They hadn't remembered it very well, but there were two chamberlains, which I assume were eunuchs, great big guys. That's usually who the chamberlains were. Had decided they were going to kill the king at night. And Mordecai caught wind of it, and Mordecai told the king, and they hung those two guys, and the king's life was saved. So Mordecai is been forgotten. And one night the king can't sleep, and he says, "Bring out all the books." And so they read to him out of the Chronicles. And he said, "Well, has anybody honored this Mordecai for what he did?" And they said, "Nothing was ever done." He said, "I'm going to honor him." And so he calls Haman in. He says, "Haman, how would I honor the very highest honor for a man in my kingdom?" Haman thinks it's going to be him, Oh my! So he gives this big elaborate thing about being on the king's horse and dressed in the best clothes and paraded through the cities. And when it's all done, he said, "Go get Mordecai. That's the man I'm going to honor." So Haman had to walk him through the cities, made Haman really mad. Haman had 10 sons too, which we'll discuss here in just a minute. I mean, this is a big deal here, what we're going to see happen. So Esther 4, 8 through 14.
Also, he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther.
And now this is Mordecai showing Esther this decree that Haman has tricked the king into making.
And to explain it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. And Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai.
Now, let's get something straight. Hathach is one of the eunuchs of the palace. Very important man, because we're looking at mentoring here, right? Mm-hmm. Mordecai is mentoring Esther, and then he has taken the information to Hathach, and Hathach has brought it to Esther. Now Hathach is going to be mentoring Queen Esther. She's queen now.
Again Esther spoke unto Hathach, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai, saying, All the king's servants and the people of the king's province do know that whoever, whether a man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall there relief and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?
Mordecai is telling her, you have a chance of dying if he doesn't hold the golden scepter out to you, mm-hmm. but you're going to die anyway.
Yeah.
They're going to kill every Jew in all the empire. Mm-hmm. Now these Jews, Brenda, these are the accountants. These are the merchants. Mm-hmm. They handle the gold, the silver, just like they handle the oil and the platinum and everything in the world. God has given them to be the merchant class of the world. Mm-hmm. And you're going to destroy them all? The king doesn't even understand what he's done. He's taken Haman's word for it. But once he's made this decree, it cannot be overturned. Really weird things here. Like you're going to go in there to see the king and have an audience, but unless he holds the golden scepter out, he's going to put you to death for even coming in there. Mm-hmm. Weird kinds of things going on here. But the king loved Esther, and when she did go into him and talk to him about this, he did hold out the golden scepter, and he listened to everything that she had to say. So let's turn to Esther 4 and read verse 15 through 17.
Then Esther told them to return to Mordecai this answer, Go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my handmaiden and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him.
Now, I want you to think about this. We read over these verses, Brenda, and just go to the next verses. Mm-hmm. She has asked all the Jews in Shushan. There's about the lesson writer thinks there's about 5,000 of them in Shushan. And she and all her handmaidens are going to fast. Now, notice what it says here. Neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day.
Right.
I challenge anybody to try that.
Yeah.
I challenge anybody to try that. See if you can.
I'm not going to do that.
It's bad enough to fast from food. Mm-hmm. Our pastor asked the deacons to fast for 24 hours. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Mm-hmm. I don't eat a lot, but you get a piece of candy. Mm-hmm. You get a cracker and some cream cheese. Through the day, you might have not very many calories worth of food,
but you have some.
You get some.
Yeah.
I'm talking nothing.
Yeah.
Zero food. Now, compound that with nothing to drink.
Yeah.
You realize that 3 days of no water and no food, you would be absolutely as weak as a cat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean weak as a cat. We just read over that like there's nothing to it.
Yeah.
Now, why do you think they were fasting from food and water for 3 days and 3 nights?
Well, they were praying as well.
They were
that
seeking
was
God.
the purpose, seeking
They
God's
were asking
will.
God to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we just read over these fasts like they're no big deal. You just try it sometime. See if you can fast 3 days and 3 nights and go about your normal business. What did Jesus say? If you're going to fast, don't do it with ashes and sackcloth on and look all sad. He said, you just go about your normal business and fast. And God will honor that. Yeah, easy done. Easy said.
Yeah.
Now, I guarantee you not easily done.
No.
You might be able to fast 3 days without anything to eat. It'd about kill you to do it. Try with no water for 3 days.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you what, devastating.
Mm-hmm.
Devastating. Now, she's asked all the Jews, and Mordecai has listened to her. And the end result of this is when Esther went into the king, he held the golden scepter out to her.
Mm-hmm.
And Esther tricked Haman and had a big banquet. And Esther tells the king what's about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, who's caused this? She said, that terrible man right there, Haman, has caused it. And they hung Haman on the gallows they'd set up for Mordecai.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about historical stuff here. Haman had 10 sons, and after Haman had been hung, the king came to Esther and said, what are we going to do with these 10 sons? What do you think she told him?
I don't remember.
Hang them.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
Hang them.
Yeah.
Little, sweet, little, beautiful Esther. I got 10 sons here, this awful man Haman, that we've put to death. What about them? Hang them!
Yeah, get rid of the line.
They're trying to eliminate this Agag group completely and stop this propagation. God had asked him to destroy these people back when Samuel was king, and here we are hundreds of years in the future, and what do we have? Someone trying to destroy the Jews. Now, it's important to understand that these men and women that were taken into captivity in 3 different conquerings by Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went with the first. He set up this puppet king, Jeconiah. And finally, Jeconiah rebelled against him, and he come back. He killed his sons in front of him. He put Jeconiah's eyes out, and he took the last of them. Now, these are the best that the nation has to offer, the smartest, the healthiest, and took them back to Persia to put them to work in Persia. And 70 years is going to transpire between the first taking and the time that Nehemiah is before Cyrus the king, and Cyrus says, why art thou downtrodden? And he says, well, while I'm here as cupbearer, the gates of Jerusalem are burned down and the temple is torn down. And the nation, Cyrus, the Mede, is going to pay for them to rebuild the nation of Israel. Why is it important? Because in this is going to be the lineage of the Messiah. 400 years after they go back and build back Jerusalem, there's no more Moloch, there's no more Baal. God has accomplished what he intended to accomplish. Now they got to deal with Alexander the Great. They got to deal with Artaxerxes, Maccabeus, Maccabeus the Hammer. I'm getting that wrong. Anyway, they had the Hanukkah circumstance where one of the generals that Alexander the Great, when he died, said, give it to the strong, and they split the kingdom up. Antiochus Epiphanes came down and tried to destroy Jewish worship, and Maccabee raised an army and wiped them out and reestablished temple worship and relit the menorahs in the temple. And it says in the New Testament that Christ even celebrated Hanukkah, the winter festival of lights, which is about the same time as Christmas. Anyway, I'm getting a little far ahead of myself here, but lots of history. If he had been successful, Haman had been, none of that would have been able to happen.
Right.
You'd have had no reestablishment of the temple. You wouldn't have had 400 years of no idol worship. You wouldn't have the lineage set up for the Messiah to come, for his death, burial, and resurrection, for forgiveness of sins. None of that would have happened. Mm-hmm. You understand, we look at God's judgment, we see it as harsh, but he sees into the future. Mm-hmm. He's not bound by our time-space continuum, and he knows exactly what's going to happen, and he's setting things up, organizing things, setting things up to maintain the lineage of the Lord Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And he's doing it through Benjamites. Mm-hmm. That's significant, because Benjamin almost got wiped out, and God almost allowed them to do it before he stayed their hand because of their rebellion and their idol worship. And yet he's using men and women from this tribe to set up a deliverance of the nation of Israel, which some years later will be bringing back the whole nation, about 50,000 of them, to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem and set up 400 years later for the coming of the Messiah. Phenomenal.
Of course.
Phenomenal. Now I want you to know that the king could not get rid of the decree that Haman had tricked him into signing. But what he did is he signed another decree that allowed the Jews, when that day came, to be prepared to protect themselves. And the Jews fell upon these Haman allies, killed 500 of them in Shushan, and killed 75,000 of them across the empire of Persia. Can you imagine being a king, running a huge empire from India all the way to Ethiopia, and losing 75,000 of your subjects in one day?
Significant.
75,000 that aren't going to pay taxes.
Mm-hmm.
75,000 aren't going to be working in the fields. Mm-hmm. 75,000 aren't going to be involved in construction. And yet that is the sacrifice that King Artaxerxes, not Artaxerxes, but Ahasuerus, the great-grandfather of Artaxerxes, he has set this up because of his love for Esther. Mm-hmm. A pagan king, worshiping a pagan god, but loved this woman so much that he sacrificed over 75,000 of his subjects mm-hmm. in order to maintain the Jews in Persia. Mm-hmm. Pretty phenomenal.
It is.
Pretty phenomenal. Well, here we have mentors. We have Mordecai mentoring Esther. We have the eunuch. What was his name? Forgot his name. Hatash. Mentoring Esther. There was another eunuch when she was first brought in for this year's preparation. I can't remember his name, but he also helped her and mentored her, gave her the best food, all that kind of thing. Through life, you need other people to take you under their wing, as we say in our society, mm-hmm. and try to help us, to mentor us. I can think of a lot of different people that have done that for me. I think of Glenn Warren over here, mm-hmm. my neighbor, who helped me get rid of brush and build fence. And, you know, my dad was off working, but he was a neighbor, and he'd come over here every weekend and do something with me. Mm-hmm. Let me borrow his tractor and his brush hog to brush hog down all the multi-floor rows on this place. Mm-hmm. We've had people like that through our life, have we not?
Yes.
That have been mentors, guides, help us take what one generation has and move it to the next generation. And I think this is a prime example of that. You know, I think at this age that we're probably past being mentored too much. We're supposed to be the one that does the mentoring, right? Mm-hmm. And to do that, we have to look around and evaluate where there is need for mentoring. Some people don't want any mentoring, mm-hmm. don't want any advice, and some do. Mm-hmm. The other is that there may be, in the process of rejection for mentoring, need to fast and pray. I don't mind the praying.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I don't like the fasting. Thank God we don't have to do too much of that anymore. I'm telling you, that's awful.
I know. It's terrible.
Try it sometime.
No.
All you out there think you're going to fast and pray, try a 3-day fast and see what happens. Unbelievable.
No bluebell?
No Bluebell, that'd be the worst thing. No
Yep.
Bluebell ice cream before you go to bed. That'd
Yeah.
be. So, in this mentoring process, does it require us to be accountable?
Well, of course.
What ways?
Well, if somebody asks you for advice or for teaching, it's very important, I think, to not immediately pop out with an answer. You know what I mean? Say, well, I need to pray and study on this myself. I need to prepare myself to even discuss it with you. Not to just, spout off the first thing off the top of your mind. I think it's important that you prepare yourself to give advice. I think it's more giving of advice than it is a long-term mentoring. There are people who I think are built to do that, who are made to do that. But I think,
of course, we do that with our children.
Well,
we?
Sure,
As
of
we're
course
raising
you
them
do.
up. That's a long-term mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
It is important to recognize that we can make mistakes from time to time.
Of course.
And someone might need to mentor us. Somebody might need to make us accountable. In any case, we have many, many, many examples in the Bible about people mentoring other people, giving them their advice. Samuel to David, Nathan to David. We could go on and on. Need to look for opportunities, not be too nosy.
Yeah, that's an issue now.
It is now. But
although we put our whole lives on social media all the time.
I don't.
Anyway, I know.
I'm not on Facebook.
I know. You're
not
so,
on Facebook.
You're
and I
so
don't pretend to be.
virtuous. I know.
And Daryl Dickinson, who called it Wastebooks, now got 3 Facebook accounts.
Yeah.
What's that mean?
Nothing.
Recognize the opportunity to market through Facebook.
Right.
Me, I'm not getting a Facebook account. I'd be in jail probably in a week. But anyway, look for opportunities to mentor, particularly younger people. Look for opportunities to provide advice and direction. And the older you get, I think the Lord will give you more opportunities. See you next week.